Mike did all the work in this room. Well, Mike and Mike, yes.
Just in the final little email saying, "Hi, yep, log in."
Hi, Alexa. Thanks for joining. Did you hear us?
Hi, everybody. I can. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're actually right. See a panel right above you? That's the microphone.
How's Detroit?
You know what? This is my first time here, and it has been so fun. I have to say, I'm quite tired, but the food's wonderful. The people have been wonderful, and we had a great client event here yesterday, which was a lot of fun too. So
Wonderful. Is it colder or warmer than at home?
About the same. I do wish I had brought a puffy or some sort of a bigger jacket. But it's nice. I think heading back home, I live in Maine. We'll have our first frost tonight. So I'm going to scurry home and then cover the gardens.
Nice. All right, so we've got Alexa, Jess, Gianna, and then we have us. So speaker-wise, we're good. If you want to wait a few more minutes to let people roll in, it's completely up to. Oh, we gotta wait for Shamsi, I guess, too. Let's wait for Shamsi. Sounds good. I don't think you had the light bars in here last time, Mike.
Yeah,
No,
these are
that-
new addition.
Yeah, that's actually Nate had added that because red team versus blue.
Yep.
Couple more folks joining in.
Nice.
Okay, everyone ready?
Yeah, we're ready when you are, Shamsi.
Okay, sorry,
No.
I was coming and two students had questions. So that's always unprepared office hour. Thank you everyone for joining. And I have to read something actually because it's very important. This session is recorded and that's why I have to read this. So since it is being recorded, it may include your likeness. Hello, come in please. And or your voice. You have the option of muting your camera or microphone, but participate implies authorization for Mass Bay to use such likeness and voice in this recording in perpetuity. So, okay, now that we are done with the sentence, I'm Shamsi Musavi. I'm the director of Cybersecurity Center for Cybersecurity Education. I always mix them up. And I also teach computer science and cybersecurity at Mass Bay. Welcome everyone. And I would like to introduce Megan Martinez and the rest of the team, panelists here from WiCyS. We are very fortunate to have this collaboration with you guys. Thank you for coming and presenting to our students. So we are very excited to hear everyone's experience because as you all know, there aren't many women in cybersecurity field. So that is one of the goals of the center, to increase the participation of women in cybersecurity. So from my point of view, I have you anytime you want to talk to me. I'm talking to students. You need advice, as I have been doing a minute ago. So please contact me. You can find my email address on the website on Center for Cybersecurity Education. please contact me with any advice on the program, etc. So it is my pleasure to introduce Megan Martinez, and please take over.
Sounds good. I'll use this just to make sure my voice is, October's always very busy, and so sometimes my voice goes in and out. I am very pleased to be with all of you here today, here in person and virtually. As Shamsi mentioned, my name is Megan Martinez. I am the Vice President of the WiCyS Massachusetts chapter. We're very pleased to be here, and I'm also always happy to be here and support MassPay because I work with them in my day job representing CyberTrust Massachusetts as well. So just really quickly in terms of WiCyS Massachusetts, WiCyS stands for Women in Cybersecurity. We welcome everyone, and it's great to see people from all different backgrounds and representing all different groups of folks. And while participation in local chapter events and conversations is open to all, we encourage you to consider formally joining WiCyS National, of which there is a student membership tier, so that you can gain the larger benefits of the diverse community and the many training opportunities that National brings to its members. During today's session, we welcome any questions you have and are happy to connect with you after today's event. I'm sure I believe you can find us all on LinkedIn, and certainly you can contact Robin or Shamsi if you have specific questions for us. We hope and we want to make time for you all to ask questions to us today as well. So before I briefly introduce who's joined us today, just to set a little context, it's interesting. I only recently just watched Hidden Figures, and in that movie, if no one's ever seen it, they refer to women as computers. And they're not really people, they're things, right? And this was during the early part of the space race here in the United States. And that term actually goes back until the mid 1800s, where again, it was meant to in my opinion, personal opinion, kind of demean, if you were a computer, you were doing, these calculations, right? Very tedious. It was seen as, a lesser role, less educated, cheaper. And, that kind of resonated with me thinking about, we've come so far for women in cybersecurity in a lot of ways, but then you also had this at this huge annual cybersecurity event at Black Hat this year, of which at least one of our panelists was at. A big cybersecurity vendor had real live women staged at this event wearing lampshades on their head, meant to be just physical decoration on this vendor floor space. And so clearly we have a lot more to do, not just in terms of challenges that we face as women, but also the larger cybersecurity community. And it's great to see folks that may identify as allies here today. So let me just introduce the rest of the panel before we kind of dive in. So I have joining in person, Michaela Vidal, who is our treasurer of WiCyS Massachusetts. Joining us virtually, we have Gianna Dean, who is our president of our chapter. We also have a good friend and former colleague of mine, Jess Garcia, who I believe is our newest board member. Not to put you on the spot there, Jess. And then we also have another friend and colleague of mine, Alexa Ellis, here as well. So we've got a wonderful panel. I think we got some great questions between us. I think we have a lot of diverse experience. So Michaela, I'll start with you and then I'll go virtually. Do you want to just tell folks a little bit about yourself, where you are, and your time in cybersecurity?
Sure. So I am on the business side of cybersecurity. So I am the chief revenue officer for a company called Phylum in the AppSec space. I've been in cybersecurity, in the cybersecurity market for about 15 years. I do bring a little bit of a different angle, right, to a lot of the technical discussions, right, being on the business side, which does not mean that I'm not completely not technical, right, but do bring that perspective. And I will also, I'm definitely the oldest person on this panel, which also can bring a very unique perspective depending on the questions that you have.
Thank you, Michaela. Going virtually, Gianna, would you like to introduce yourself for us?
Yes, of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Gianna Dean. I am, like Megan said, the president of WiCyS Massachusetts. I've been in cybersecurity for just about 5 years. Came out of college and got right into cybersecurity, but I'll talk about a little bit as we go through the panel that I did not get here a traditional way. I went to school for criminal justice and minored in computer information systems, and will emphasize during my talk how important making connections is and networking, and that although, you know, your path might not be straightforward into cybersecurity, it doesn't mean that you can't get there. And so that's my perspective that's going to be coming from me on this panel. But I work at Evercore. It's a investment bank in New York, but I work remotely in Boston. And I've been in financial services since I started my career. So happy to be here today, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Gianna. I'm just gonna go across the board here, literally. Alexa, how about you?
Hi, everybody. So I'm Alexa. I also had a non-traditional start to my career in cybersecurity. We can talk about that throughout the discussion. I have been in cybersecurity and IT security for the last 16 years, though the course of my career, I've worked for a variety of different organizations. I'm on the client side of things in terms of cybersecurity, and currently I'm working for Immersive Labs, a partner of CyberTrust, and I've been at Immersive for about a year. I am a senior client success manager there. So pleased to be here today.
Thanks, Alexa. And Jess, how about you?
Yeah, hi everyone. So I am Jess Garcia, or Jessica if I am in trouble. I'm a full-time mom to a wonderful little girl, but as my full-time, outside of that full-time job, I work for the Global Otis Elevator Company. I've worked in IT and cybersecurity roles for the last 10 years. I'm currently the authentication lead for our cybersecurity program, and essentially am responsible for ensuring that our digital systems are only accessed or accessible by people who are supposed to be accessing them or that data. So I am extremely passionate about being a woman in cybersecurity, and I'm so excited to be here today and share this experience with all of you. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Jess. And you know, for those of you that don't know me, I think I was trying to count while everyone was talking. I think I have like 12, 13 years experience in cybersecurity for the public and private sector. So, and also similarly to the rest of us, I think one of the universal themes you'll hear is that we all generally have a very non-traditional path into cybersecurity. I don't think that is uncommon in some ways for women in technology and in cybersecurity. And it's through organizations like WiCyS and opportunities like this that we hope to, you know, I guess, bring more people, bring more women and historically marginalized communities into this space through a diverse set of pathways. So, Jess, I'm going to go back to you. Aside from non-traditional, perhaps, what are 3 words that you would use to describe your experience as a woman in cyber? Or is that what you would call yourself? I mean, I suppose there might be another category or descriptor that might be more apt.
Yeah, so I know I'm certainly not the first one, but I always like to use the word pioneer. It often feels like you might be the only woman in the room, which can be extremely intimidating, but somebody's got to start and be that first one in the room, right? So I like to think of myself, I'm like, I'll be that person, because if I can show these other women that have amazing skills and that can do it, that you can be here too, that's an amazing thing. So I like to think of, you know, again, pioneer or unique, because again, it's, you know, when we're not being portrayed as a lampshade, we have amazing talent and we, you know, offer so much in this space. So I like to think of us as unique and pioneers, or at least for myself, if that makes sense.
I love that. One thing I think that may resonate with some folks is that as you pointed out, right, pioneer, trailblazer, really important, really powerful descriptors, but also can be a little lonely, right? I think, as you point out as well. Michaela, what are some of your descriptors that you would use?
Yeah, I think that if I'm, kind of describing, we talk a lot about, the untraditional paths that we've all kind of taken to get to where we are, right? So when I think about my career and the words that I would use to describe them, a couple of them come to mind, which is unpredictable, right? Which is I think you all have to be prepared for that, right? Cybersecurity generally is unpredictable, and then where that takes you in your roles is unpredictable. And then I think instinctual is another one that comes to mind, right? I think that, this is something I talk about a lot, but it's something that, and it took me a little too long, I think, to really rely on for my own success, right? Which is like, you know, believing in your own instinct, right? Relying on your own instinct and not questioning yourself, right? Because instinct, again, plays such a huge role in cybersecurity, your ability to just be able to, right, reading other human beings, being able to analyze attacker behavior, things like that, right? But also being able to really believe in yourself, right, and your own instincts and the decisions that you're making on a regular basis, whether that's in your like day-to-day job or in your kind of your career and where you want to go next, right? And then the third one for me is complex, because absolutely none of this is easy or predictable, and really sometimes conflicting, honestly. And so I think that that's just something that you're just bound to come up against in this arena.
Absolutely. Those are really great descriptors as well, and could apply to anyone, right? But I think, as you point out, there's an added layer of context and challenge when it comes to being a woman in cyber. Alexa, what's your take? Any additional words that you would use to describe, or reactions to Jess and Michaela so far?
Sure. As we were talking, I actually added a descriptor, creator. I feel like in cybersecurity as a woman, being the idea maker and feeling confident and comfortable presenting your ideas and creating processes and strategies and just putting yourself out there is really important. Obviously, you have to be empowered to be able to do that and supported. But I certainly feel over the years that the word creator, creative has really been integral to my cybersecurity career, which, again, maybe non-traditional, but I think it's been really helpful. And of course, tenacity and resilience, I think, are, typically words. You could be, female or male. You could use these terms. Anyone could use these terms in their career, of course. But I think as a woman in cyber, and just the representation of women in cybersecurity in the field and the underrepresentation, we are still growing. I think it's really important to just be resilient, be able to be your authentic self, work through challenges in a strong way, have your voice, and then of course tenacity. Just it's hardworking, it's ever changing. There are certain things that are omnipresent, but it's a fast-paced field, so I think it's really important just to be able to be flexible and adaptable, and of course always speak up if you need clarification or if you're not feeling like you're understood or heard. So tenacity, creator, and resilience.
I love that. I love the creator. As someone that majored in the humanities field as an undergraduate, I think traditionally there's often been an underestimation for folks that do not come from a formal technical background. So thank you for that. And resilience, I think, is super important as well. Gianna, a two-part question for you. One, what are some of your descriptors? Because I think it's important that everyone kind of hear from each of us on this particular question, but then also when it comes to this idea of resilience, what have been some of the toughest challenges for you as a woman in cyber, and being someone that probably oftentimes is one of the few women in the room?
Yeah, so I could not agree more with all of the words to describe that the rest of the panelists had said, but one that I would like to add is rewarding as well. And I think that I'm starting to now feel that and understand that as I go further on in my career. And it then piggybacks with the resilience piece of it of, I think for a long time, I kind of underestimated of like, oh, I work in cybersecurity. I didn't really see it as that big of a deal of the concept of, yes, I knew it was hard to get into this field as a woman. But then as I started working through it and people would ask me like, oh, what do you do for work? And I say cybersecurity, you often see people's eyes light up and they're like, oh my gosh, you work in cybersecurity? Like that's crazy. And I think that I kind of took that for granted of like how it was a challenge to get here and that it isn't the easiest. And so that just kind of made me then start to reflect and realize that this is really rewarding to be in this field, and especially like we have all said, getting here in an traditional way. And so that's just one word I want to add to how I would describe working in cybersecurity and agree with all the others. And then I think that one thing I wanted to highlight with like how my roles is that mostly my teams have been a good mix of both women and men. And so I kind of have a different perspective of being, I feel like that's been really helpful for me. My first career in cyber, I actually met my former boss at a WiCyS conference, and then she asked me to come join her team. So right off the bat, I had a woman take me up under her wing and say, I'm going to teach you the routes. And then at my new role, my whole leadership chain, me to our CISO, is a woman. And so I've been able to have that different perspective. Yeah. And that was something that was like really great for me when I was interviewing for this job. I've been there for just over 2 years now. That's Evercore where I work now. That really was like made me want this job even more. Was like, wow, like there's 4 people in the chain that are all women. So being able to learn from them and grow from them. I think that it's also it's that piece of rewarded, like showing rewardness of, having that, knowing that that's out there and knowing that, there is a place for us in this field. And so, although I definitely have worked with men, obviously, and still do on a day-to-day basis, I feel like my teams have been very supportive, both men and women. So I haven't had as much struggle in that route. And so just hopefully that's helps people know that there are both women and men out there that want to see us succeed in cybersecurity as well.
Well, that's very positive. Thank you, Gianna. First of all, for I think we tend sometimes to talk about the struggles, and I was talking to Michaela at lunch. My personal view, right, is that we want people to be excited about cybersecurity, but also be prepared for some of the challenges. But thank you for reminding us that this is also a rewarding field.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious, and apologies to the panelists, I'm going a little off script here because I'm very intrigued by Gianna's experience from a visibility perspective. And just I'll turn to you because I know you and I have shared some leadership teams and have seen, shared some seen female leaders in cybersecurity. But what is your experience? What has your visibility been in seeing, quote unquote, seeing yourself, right, in leadership positions in cyber, whether it be from a gender perspective or I know you're very proud, I don't know if you would use the term Latina in cyber. So what has that been like? Have you felt that there has been that visibility and that's someone that looks like you? And what's your experience been there?
Yeah. So it's interesting because I feel like it's better now, than it was even a few years ago. I think, to Gianna's point, we're definitely seeing more women in the room. I, made point to get out there and find organizations that focused on more Hispanics in technology. And I think while I don't necessarily see that, in a broader sense across the industry or in my experience, having this organization, so it's called High Tech Hispanic Emerging IT Executive Council, where they focus on Hispanics that are in IT roles, not necessarily cybersecurity, but IT roles that, and the goal is so that we really have that opportunity to have folks to look up to and say, oh, they've done it, so it's possible. Because even though, we talk about being the pioneers and being the only one in the room, sometimes, to your point, Megan, the word lonely really resonated with me, because I often get stuck in my head where I say, maybe there's a reason why there's nobody like me here. And I have to stop myself and say, no, there's not. I am here for a reason. I belong here. I deserve to be here. And so I think sometimes I challenge myself with that and say, if I need to be that, forerunner that's able to show other people in my shoes that, this is possible. And just because we may not see it today, and that may be discouraging, we have to make that happen in our lives and kind of help drive that change, is the way I've come to see it. But I think it is very encouraging to see women taking the role of a CISO, more often across the industry, or having even females on your senior leadership team within cybersecurity. Unfortunately, where I am now, we have 2 women on our, SLT organization, and one of them is my boss, and I'm so proud about that. I brag about that all the time. But I think overall, it's getting there. I think for, not just having a few, not just aiming to, company having a quota to have half, or, whatever it might be, truly looking at somebody and saying, you have the skills and qualities that would really benefit here. Not only, you're bringing in a different cultural experience or a different, experience as, what you identify as in your gender, you're, able to offer that instead of just kind of, saying we want to put this person here so that we look better as an organization. So I have to say, it's definitely encouraging to see that. But I think seeing more of it is what I'm looking forward to in the future.
Thanks, Jess.
Yeah.
Alexa, I'm curious for you, we all come from different backgrounds and are on different teams with different focuses. What is the experience in, customer field like customer success? I feel like, oftentimes in conversations I'm in, that field often doesn't get talked about, even though it's vitally important, especially since so many of us rely on vendor relationships and we need someone to help support and empower us and make those relationships successful. Do you find that has been a more or less welcome space for women?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Interestingly, and this is going way back into the vault, I started my career in cybersecurity sales and IT security sales. So and then over the course of time, I ventured into account management and client success. Between the two, and all these years later, flash forward, I do find that client success is a widely supportive role or department for women, for men too, but I've felt very supported specifically in client success over the many years that I've been in the field. It's interesting as well because you'll see typically more women be or join the client success role or the client success department within an organization. However, at the last 2 or 3 organizations I've been at, it's been pretty equitable and equal between men and women on the team, but supportive. I have felt like my ideas and my voice have been heard. I've felt like I've been hired and welcomed onto teams for the right reasons. In terms of what Jessica was speaking about, I think that's very important and very relevant because throughout my career too, I've heard from mostly male leaders or male counterparts that there's always a job waiting for women in tech or women in cyber. There's a job on the shelf. There's a job that is vacant and has been for years because women haven't applied. And although at face value, that can be seen as sort of a positive thing, it's actually not, because if there are vacancies for women in cybersecurity, they shouldn't be kept in the back room, so to speak. They should be publicized and put out there, and women should be encouraged to apply for positions in cyber that otherwise they may not know about, they may not feel comfortable applying to. I think um, skills can always grow. You know, you can talk about hard skills and soft skills in any career. I think it really comes, and I loved that we opened up with those three words because it comes down to, in my very humble opinion, it comes down to really who the person is. And if you have the drive, you have the motivation, and you have the interest, and this is coming from somebody that worked in fashion. That was the direction that I thought I was going to go. And we can talk about that another time. And then, you know, I landed in cybersecurity and I couldn't have made a more fulfilling decision. It was a complete leap of faith, but it's been the length of my career. So I do think client success has been widely supportive. It's specifically supportive in terms of being a female, being a woman. I have always felt well received. I do know that's not everybody's experience, so I feel lucky there as well. But I think if you have the interest, you have the motivation, you have the curiosity, I think curiosity is key, then you know, cyber is really approachable. And women are needed. I can't emphasize enough. Women are needed in tech, they're needed in IT security, they're needed in cybersecurity. And I think if women can join cyber and know that about themselves, that they're not just like wanted to fill vacancies or fill voids, but they're actually needed. I think that's important to go into the field with.
That's wonderful. And also, I'm going to pick your brain later about your, we'll have to have a part 2 on your pivot from fashion to cybersecurity. Michaela, as far as I know, the only person, but chime in, other panelists, that was at Black Hat. What is your experience about, you know, I've never been to Black Hat or DEF CON. You know, I feel like, right or wrong, you know, those kind of institutional events tend to have a kind of what I guess I would call kind of bro-y culture associated with them. You know, that's kind of part of being a part of the industry and how the industry was kind of founded and started off. But what's your perspective? And also you're a lot of times in the VC world, right? Which again tends, for lots of institutional reasons, tends to be very male dominated. So tell us a little bit about, you know, what your experience has been and some of the challenges that maybe you've encountered and how you've kind of navigated those throughout your career and how that's changed.
Yeah, so on the business side, it can be a little different, right? So, you know, I have not really there's not been a lot of representation, right? I'm also, as I mentioned, the oldest person on this panel, right? So I've been doing this for about 15 years, a little bit more. And in that time, I have only worked for one female founder of a cyber company, right?
That says something. Female founders, very few.
Yeah, I mean, statistically, there's not many. I do think that is getting better, right? You know, but women get funded less, right? Even though you actually, and this is not about comparing men and women, right? But statistically, actually, you see that women-led companies do better, right? The statistics show that female-run or founded companies, right, actually perform better. Investors make more money, right? And yet investors still have hesitations to, you know, because they get funded less. So I think that that's just concerning, right? Because I think it's a little bit of an awareness issue.
Very data driven of some people.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, and like I said, it's instinctual. A lot of this cybersecurity and the business side is instinctual, right? And your instincts have bias attached to them. And you know, that's just the case for everyone. And when you're in an industry that has a history that is so male dominated, right? That can just be the bias. That's just the bias, right? And it doesn't matter what the data says. You know, we're also in an industry that is very network friendly, right? You're also talking about an industry where a lot of folks are coming out of the military, right? They're getting their start in cyber out of whether it's the Israeli military or the US military, right? Which is also tends to be another environment where men tend to rise up or succeed at a statistically higher rate than women, right? So you're also just so our industry does have a lot of things working against it when it comes to that kind of equity, right? About where our technology is being built, right? Who's founding it, who's funding it. And so you know, that's not to say that there isn't opportunity. I want to be clear about that because obviously I've had a really great career, but I have not seen a lot of myself. I have been. This is probably going to sound a little shocking, but I have actually been the only woman at a company. I have multiple times been the only female executive. I've been the only woman in the boardroom, and it can be, you know, it can be intimidating, right? I think that's a good word for it. And so I think that what that has led to for myself, and what I hope that other, you know, folks listening on this call really take away from that is that there is actually a lot of opportunity, and there are a lot of allies, and we have made a lot of progress, right? When it comes to the environments, I think the environments did used to be a lot more hostile. I do think I will be honest, I was shocked that this year's Black Hat, I really did not think that this year's Black Hat, I could not believe that there were multiple, it wasn't just the lampshades, there was a couple of things that went awry, if you will, when it comes to how women are viewed in our space, right? But I have to say, I was shocked, and that's coming from someone who's seen quite a bit of misogyny in this, and so I thought it was surprising to me that we experienced that this year, because I do think that we've come further than this year's Black Hat suggests.
Okay.
I want to believe that. I guess that's my own bias, saying that I want to believe that. But I think that what the Palo Alto example represents, right, and I think that what I've experienced in my career is really. It's not that nobody noticed that was inappropriate, right? I think after the fact, it came out that there was quite a few women actually internally and men who thought that's not really very appropriate, but they didn't feel like they could say anything. And I think that that has been one of my biggest challenges, right? Is really finding your voice in this space, right? And so I think that is a very valid fear, speaking up. Right? It's a very valid fear when it comes to, okay, will I be retaliated against? Will I, you know, am I the only one thinking this thing if I'm not in an environment where like I've been able to have a side conversation and know someone else is thinking the same way, right? So you might feel a little isolated in that sense. And I think that you know, if we're going to make progress in this industry, but Jen, even for ourselves individually, right? You know, do you want to be in it? You have to ask yourself, do you want to be in a position where you don't feel comfortable speaking up, right? Do you want to be in a company where you don't feel comfortable speaking up? Do you want to be in an industry, right? And so I think that for me, that's how I look at it, right? I think that's where we're, you know, all of us individually being able to find our voices and then feeling comfortable speaking up and creating those environments, right, is actually going to be, it has been a challenge in the past, but I also think it's like our path to progress.
Yeah, that's wonderful, and very well said. And I think, you know, we had to talk about it at lunch. I know Jess and I have talked about this. I think I've talked to a lot of people about this in various iterations about the relative privilege that we all have. And, you know, there is, we talk about risk assessment a lot in cybersecurity from a technical perspective, but we all individually have to do kind of our own personal risk assessment about, is this a safe space for us, for me to individually speak up? What is the cost benefit analysis? And how can I find a place where I'm going to feel at least supported, minimally empowered, et cetera. And I think that comes, you know, we've talked for some that is an innate feature, I guess, or trait that some have. I think for myself, that's something that's come with age and experience. Gianna, I'm curious, when we talk about this idea of finding your voice and finding that comfort level, what's that been like, in the last 5 years for you in your career? Has it been kind of an evolution? Have you found it changing at all?
Yeah, definitely an evolution, I would say. I think I'm now, and I think that this is a term we hear a lot in cybersecurity, especially as women, with imposter syndrome for so long. That's what, like, that felt like it was like a shield over me. Like, I felt like I was an imposter. I felt like, I often went back to the fact that, like, how did I get here? Am I supposed to be here? And so I think now, as I take that step back and I like start to really be in tune with the fact that I did make it here and I am growing in my career, and I'm starting to enjoy and really like what I do, it's making me now like notice that and say, like, I do deserve to be here. And so that's helping me now be able to want to make more contributions to speaking up, and realizing that if I want to, and I do want to continue to grow as a woman in cybersecurity, I need to have that courage to speak up. And so I think it's more of that. What I found is the evolution of not so much not having the space to do so, but having the confidence to do so is what I'm really has come with, again, time and experience. And I feel like I still often say, like, I've only been in cyber for 5 years, and I feel like then I'm like, but it has been 5 years, you know what I mean? So I think it's this back and forth, but I think it really comes from evolving in the confidence in myself, rather than a safe space, in my experience.
Thank you. I think it is a give and take, right? Depending on personality, environment, things like that. And that at the end of the day, though, it is, I think confidence is a huge part, or the challenges with being comfortable in confidence and growing that as a woman in cybersecurity, or as a woman in general. I know we're kind of coming up on time, and I'm curious, we've been lucky, in the room, in the space here, we've had several folks that I'm making an assumption here, but I likely identify as males, both, some folks here at the college and some learners. Justin, Alex, I'm wondering if you could share what have been some positive allyship experiences. Have you, or I guess maybe I shouldn't assume, I'm hoping, but have you had positive experiences of men showing their allyship, and what has that looked like? What are some of the challenges that you've experienced, or maybe where you wish you'd had an ally, that you could maybe give some tips for some of our folks that identify as non-female?
Yeah, I can answer that briefly first. So I think, again, I have been fortunate to have mostly positive experiences. I know Gianna spoke about this as well in terms of cybersecurity. I feel like the past, perhaps the last 3 organizations I've worked with, where there have been, males in leadership positions, my managers have been males. They've been incredibly supportive of my career and the rest of the team. I think something that is very helpful as a woman in cyber, though, as well, is to find a way. I'm trying to think of a way to say this, but find a way to ensure that your management team is actively listening to you. I don't want to call out males, but I'll say it. Just we communicate so differently, or at least I believe that for the most part. So I think it's really important to make sure you have that time to foster your relationship, make sure there's clear understanding of who you each are, make sure that you're heard within your ideas, your scope, your realm, your career aspirations are put on the table. Do not hesitate to stand up for yourself and ask for the things that you need. And that took me a long time to do. But once you feel fostered and you grow that confidence and you step into yourself, there's truly no way of going back. I did have one work experience years ago where I was incredibly intimidated by my male counterparts. I was a woman on an all male team. Everybody was, nice and helpful and brilliant and all of those things. But from a leadership perspective, I didn't feel supported at all. And I look back now and I think the time that maybe I was at that specific company, I regressed a little bit. People in my own personal life noticed that I was a little bit more shy. I wasn't speaking up as much. My confidence was beginning to lack a little bit. So it's just really important, I feel, all these years later, to set your bars, set your expectations, make sure you're heard. I think communication is so important. And I say that because going way back, I'm a communication theory and political science major. So, and I feel like finding an effective way to communicate with any leader is integral to making sure that you feel confident, comfortable, understood, heard. There's that whole concept of giving space or feeling heard or taking space for XYZ. And I think it's really important in the cyber community for women to make sure that they're heard.
Thank you, Alexa. Jess, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I think I've met a lot of amazing male figures in cyber, and the reason that I got into a cyber role was because a male, was a mentor and was like, there's this role that you should consider. You may not have the technical or, the hard skill experience, but it's something that, I think you have the curiosity for, and, I'll never forget the impact that had on my life. And with that being said, I think that men joining, when we have events, even at conferences, I've pushed back on all women events. I said, you need the men to be there to hear our concerns and actually make a difference. It's something that, it's one thing if we have a safe space for women and we are doing something that is, for women, but if we are, talking about things like how to improve a work culture for women or non-standard people in these roles, I think it's integral that, the men listen. And, what Alexis was saying is, completely true. The way we communicate is different. And I believe that as well. But I think getting us to have those understandings and stopping and saying, oh, this is how they feel about this. And, I think a lot of times it might be that, a male figure may not have stepped back and said, oh, this is, what reality is like for them. And how can I, make the space more, make them feel more deserving of being in this space. So I think one of the most important things is, if you're a male and you see a women's event where everybody is welcome, please, go and listen. And like this, I love, that there are a lot of men in the room today, because it's one of the very first steps that I think is, a great progress.
Thank you. I know we're just at time, I think. I don't know if there are any questions or either in the room or if there's anyone still on the WebEx that would like to ask any questions. I'm sure we have a minute or two. We do have a question in the room. If folks need, Jess, Alexa, Gianna, feel free if you have another commitment, but please.
Oh, can you hear me? Well, I actually have a bunch of questions, so I might just have to write you. But I'm a teacher. I teach adult education at Bunker Hill, and I came across you guys because it was technology and digital literacy week, and we were talking about technology, and I was at a few events, and I ended up stumbling upon you guys. But I guess my question is, I have students who I'm trying to direct into careers that would be profitable for them. And every single one of you said you came from non-traditional paths. And so I'm like, okay, well, my learners are literally classified non-traditional learners. Like how do they, and you mentioned soft skills and hard skills, what do they do? How do they get into the field?
Okay, I'm going to answer this from a conceptual standpoint, right? So because I'm not on the technical side. You probably have a better answer for that. But this is something, you know, when I get asked, why do you stay, right? Because that is a question, you know, that some of us get asked, and my answer is always, you know, because I'm good at it. And I think that that's actually like an underrated statement of, right? Why do you go into something? Why do you stay with something, right? Well, if you're good at it, generally it's a motivating factor, right? And so, just from a conceptual standpoint, I tend to like the folks that I see who have had those non-traditional paths. It's because they accidentally realized they were good at it, right? Because they felt they came across it in that untraditional way, and then where they were like, oh, my skill set applies here in this way, and I'm good at it. And so if you can find ways to help folks understand that, right, with it's skill sets that they already have and how they can apply them in those ways where they feel then motivated because they're good at it.
Yeah. Shamsi, did you?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to ask, and thank you very much for asking that question. I want to continue with that. Maybe we should plan another event to talk about that, because first of all, thank you very much everyone on the panel for sharing your experiences and ups and downs and challenges and successes. It's very good to hear about your successes, of course. But from my point of view, who as a teacher, we also work with high school students. What it would help us is, what do we do? How do we encourage high school and first year college students to enter this field? Because that is what we really want to work on. We need, definitely, I've been to many conferences, I've seen many women in cybersecurity, but not necessarily technical. Mm-hmm. And from our point of view, we are educating students to be technical cybersecurity workers. So maybe we should have another event to talk about your experience, your advice, because I very much appreciate your advice on this.
And I know just I want to, if they have time, Jess and Jana, you're one that has been the most recent in terms of entry into the field. I know you have a non-traditional trajectory, and I know Jess started out her career as a high school intern. Am I remembering that correctly, Jess? So we've got kind of both perspectives here. If you would like to share, and I'll just go to Jess first, because Jen, I know I can find you easily enough. Jess, how did you get interested? What was the attraction for you in high school?
Yeah, so I love that question, because I completely agree that it's so important to get in at the high school level. I was fortunate that there was a company, Mass Mutual in Springfield, that we were in an urban community, very low income communities. And they came into the schools to teach students about financial literacy, as well as created a program for students that were academic scholars that met criteria to offer them internships and to teach them more about IT careers. And at the time, I knew how to turn on a computer and turn it off and maybe send, an AOL message, if we remember those. So at the time I said, there's no way. Yeah. That's just about what I knew how to do at the time. But I said, if there's a job out there and, I'm not at the legal working age yet, I'm going to go and try it and see what happens. And I absolutely fell in love, and it changed my entire life, which is why I am so passionate about this. And at the high school level, I said, I had no idea that these careers were possible. It changed what I did in college. It changed what I did for my master's program, and created these opportunities and doors for me that I would have absolutely never had, in that way at that age, without. So I think being able to get in at the high school level and say, hey, these careers are possible, and you don't need to, have a plethora of knowledge already. And there's so many free resources out there that I'd love to, spend another session talking about. It's I think so important because it truly did change my perspective of the entire world. Is and just as a brief answer to that, but I love that question and suggestion.
Thanks, Jess. How about you, Gianna? What's your elevator story?
So I will just say that, I figured out that I wanted to get into cybersecurity a lot later and was already in college where cybersecurity was not a thing. It was either you did a computer science major and that was it. Like I had mentioned, oh, I'm really interested in cybersecurity, and no one really knew how to get me there, what it was. And so just a quick background was I majored in criminal justice, and I didn't pick up a minor in computer information systems until my junior year. So I took a total of 6 computer classes, and I then said, well, I want to get into cybersecurity, and so how can I get there? And so my biggest thing is you guys having the opportunity to now know about cybersecurity or start classes into it. Just know that doesn't mean that because you don't have a full degree in it, because you don't have a master's in it, whatever it may be, that you can't get there, because every single opportunity that I've had till today has been through networking and how I talked about my curiosity and wanting to learn. And that's where I've got everywhere I am today. I'll never forget that. One thing to add too, right out of college, I got an internship with the state of Massachusetts, and they had already had an intern, but they still, took me for the interview. And it was, the guy literally told me, he was the CISO. He said, I'm hiring you because of your handshake and your curiosity to learn. And that's something I'll never forget, because there are just showing that you want to learn and you're have a passion or have a curiosity and a passion, you can get there. So I think having opportunities earlier on and knowing that what's out there is definitely beneficial. And I wish I knew that, but it doesn't mean that you can't get there as well.
Yeah, I would second Gianna's mention about the networking piece. I think that's super important. Seems to be growing more important, I think. And that's how I got in. My first career was, I was a mental health clinician. And I was very lucky to have, when I kind of pivoted into a job related to cybersecurity, I was very lucky that my boss was also a wonderful mentor and sponsor. And so it was a combination of me putting myself out there, but then also him recognizing, my potential as well, and kind of bringing me up and bringing me into rooms I wouldn't have been in. But, kind of understanding, a good handshake, looking folks in the eye, right? Being able to, tell your story a little bit. Those are all key key things, I think, that are just becoming more and more important as we go on. Any other questions? And happy to stick around and chat with you further. Yes, sir. Right here.
So it was kind of timely. I was reading an article yesterday in Forbes that about 70% of leaders in cybersecurity are experiencing burnout and, want to consider leaving the company they're in. Are there any experiences from any of the panel members, regarding that, or things that were made, burnout worse due to being a woman in cybersecurity?
Sure, I'm sure we all have a lot of opinions on that. Again, I guess, Michaela, I don't know your schedule. I can stick around for a little bit, so I might default to folks that have joined us talking about the increased rate of burnout in leaders, and as women in cybersecurity, do we think maybe it's higher? What are kind of the factors? Curious, Alexa, what's your, I guess, experience with burnout in cybersecurity, either personally or what you've seen amongst women in cybersecurity?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. And it gave me a little bit of a chuckle because speaking transparently, I've definitely experienced burnout twice in my career, which I can speak to now.
Only twice. I'm impressed.
At a previous company, like clearly two previous companies, but and I, transparently and just authentically, I did not handle it the way that I probably should have because I did not recognize it as as being burned out. And it wasn't until I read a New York Times article, I think it was over the course of the pandemic, it was 2020 or 2021, that I was like, oh my goodness, I have experienced this before. And there were all sorts of pointers and ideas of what to do when you experience burnout. And one of those things was, to communicate openly and honestly with leadership, to take the time off that you need. And just talking to that in terms of experiencing burnout or thinking that you will, are on the cusp of experiencing burnout. I think it's really important to take the time that you need. I cannot say that I'm good at taking vacation. I've taken 6 days this year, but I am planning quite a few vacations for end of the year and beginning of next. But I think it's important to take the time that you need to address burnout, how you're feeling. If you're feeling overwhelmed, I think it's really okay. It's okay too to if you've taken on too many tasks. And I think women tend to take it all on. We're great multitaskers. We fill our plates. At least I know I have. I think it's really important to take stock of what you're working on and just really prioritize what is, clearly important and what can wait. Just having authentic, I've emphasized this a lot, but just feeling confident and encouraged to speak authentically and having an open way of communication within the organization that you work with, I think is really important. And also taking advantage and using your benefits. I cannot speak to that enough, being somebody that hasn't. They're there for a reason, and a lot of companies do have mental health days. At least the company I'm working with now, talks very openly about, feeling burned out. Managers at my current company, weekly, we have one-on-ones with our managers, which I think is fantastic. So you're always keeping your finger on the pulse, for lack of a better word. But I think it's really important to not let yourself get to that point. And if you are, manage it. Don't be afraid. Just take ownership of it, because you're not the only one experiencing it.
Thank you, Alexa. And I know you're at an onsite, so whenever you need to drop, feel free, but thank you. I also chuckled when you were talking because I think the idea, I think it's probably pretty prevalent that women aren't as good at recognizing burnout because I think sometimes we just think that's the cost of being a woman in general, and having to balance, right? I had I call him my work husband at my former place, and we had the same role. He had kids, he had twins. I don't have children. I've got 3 geriatric dogs, which Shamsi and I were talking sometimes feels more burdensome than children. But I was always, he was a very present. He was a much more present father than I had been used to seeing in a professional space. And I just remember thinking, like, he would go, like, before COVID, he'd be like, I gotta go home and pick up the kids, and like, I'll be on later or something like that. But I just remember being very kind of impressed with that in a way that came very natural to him. Whereas even balancing, trying to be a good partner and trying to take care of our household with my partner, I just I carry a lot more stress about it. I think, being a woman and feeling that I have to work. I have to work twice as hard already, And then I have to work even harder to make up for the fact that we're sharing the burden at home as well. And so there's added layers kind of to your point. And just our industry in general, cybersecurity is, I could go on for days, but it's a very reactive industry. You don't see a lot of positives, because a positive thing is when something doesn't happen generally. And so I think it's a huge issue that we're only just really starting to talk about more.
It's really interesting. I know what article you're talking about, and I read an article just this morning, which actually is takes a little bit of a different take on that, because, and I see it in my day to day, which is because it does say leaders. It says cybersecurity leaders, right? But I read this article this morning that was really calling out that it's kind of bullshit, honestly. Because cybersecurity leaders, if you're talking CISOs, right? You're talking the C-level executives, right? They're no longer really coming up from practitioner backgrounds, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the people experiencing burnout, if you're talking at the VP level, yes, it's happening really at that level, right? Or at the heads of groups or things like that, right? Because you're talking about the practitioners. There's a lot of complaints out there from CISOs or from the C-level or from the broader leadership. But like I said, this morning it was funny because I see it day to day, and they called it out as bullshit, and I call a little bullshit on it too from the higher leadership level.
Yeah.
But the practitioners, 100%, because they're, like you said, there's no the different level. It's what does success mean, right? Because a good thing is when nothing happens, but how much work goes into prevention, right? And I also think in our space, there is this dichotomy, right, between reactive, proactive, how much effort you put into both, right? And that actually contributes to burnout, right? Because we do tend to be in this, sometimes I will tell you that I think that we're in the most complacent cybersecurity kind of mentality that I've ever seen, where think people it's good enough, it's good enough. Very reactive, very reduced proactiveness from practitioners, right? Which has led to a lot of burnout. And so it is definitely easy to see. And then when it comes to the question around, are women more impacted by that than men? I do think that by default, the answer is yes, but I think that overall it's one of those things where you see it time and time again in our industry, which is sometimes you can be penalized when you're good at your job, right? If you're good at your job, this is not necessarily a gender thing, but if you're good at your job, promoting you means they have to replace you, right? Or and sometimes the idea of getting someone out of a job that maybe you don't know what in larger organizations, right? Promoting someone can solve a problem for someone who might not be great at what they're doing, right? And that is something that we do see. And I think that is just another one of those things that, we have to solve from a culture and environmental place. And I think all of that does then, lead to less burnout. But
thank you very much, everyone. It was a great, but it was, I myself really enjoyed it very much. And thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
Please express our thanks to other panelists too. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And these are
I know, thanks for the
little things
cake.
for
Thank
you.
you. That's very kind.
Yeah.